Welcome again to Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott, and tonight we'll be talking to an old friend of ours. This is Charles Torpe, who is the program manager at NAMI, which is the National Alliance for Mental Illness, the Metro Suburban in Oak Park, right?
That is correct.
Charles, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. It's a blast to be with you on another stage.
Yeah.
And back to this stage.
Yes, yes. For those who wonder what that is, we perform regularly as musicians in other contexts.
That
right?
we do.
So speaking of musicians, though, the reason we're talking tonight is because NAMI has a show coming up in April. And you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Kevin, thanks for inviting us here and helping to support the event. So there's going to be an event at the 19th Century Club in Oak Park. It's going to be on April 5th at about 6 o'clock. And it's called the Recovery Slam.
Recovery Slam, like Poetry Slam or...
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely. And it's really highlighting what we've been doing for the last 4 years or so out of NAMI Metro Suburban, which is supporting this new field that we're creating called Recovery Through the Arts.
I'll talk a little bit about NAMI for those who aren't familiar with it. So, National Alliance for Mental Illness, it could be anything, right? So what exactly does the Alliance do?
Absolutely. So there are about 1,100 different chapters around the world of NAMI, including in Canada and Mexico and Malaysia and Italy. There are, actually. Though we started our affiliate about 26 years ago. We're actually in our 27th year, and it was 5 moms, and they kept seeing their sons and daughters at the state hospital at Madden and also at different psychiatrist appointments, and they said, you know, hey, we should see if we can create a place for our sons and daughters to get out into the community, to socialize, to have some recreation, and to, practice some leadership skills and support one another, and that's how our affiliate started.
And sort of is one of the ideas to sort of become more integrated into everyday society and to learn how to interact instead of in a hospital setting where you're treated as a patient, someone who's ill and incapable maybe. And isn't NAMI the opposite? It's to show you how you are in fact very capable. Is that a fair reading?
That's a fair reading of it. In the 80s, there was a movement from really centuries of people being warehoused and imprisoned for having a biological brain disorder. And that's how the state, dealt with people who had a mental illness. So in the 80s, the idea was, well, let's look at community integration. Let's have less institutions. Let's have more community mental health. And that's how the drop-in center started in that wave.
And it's been, that philosophy has been fairly successful, right? That in working with people to help them become normed into society, that in fact it turns out that that's much more useful. Or am I, again, once again, am I reading that correctly?
It's absolutely correctly. I mean, on the other side of it, we do see Sheriff Tom Dart, of Cook County Jail talking about that Cook County Jail is the largest provider of mental health services in the state. So
something he does not advocate.
He does not advocating for. He's advocating for more community mental health. And one of the things that we see happening with people with a mental health condition is that there can be a tendency because of the internalized stigma or the stigma that people experience out in the community to isolate, to stay in their homes. And what NAMI does is it gives a place, for people to get out of the home, out of those 4 walls. And what we say is open that 500-pound door, admit, say, hey, I'm a person who has a biological brain disorder, and we say it's an opportunity for people to take off the mask that they sometimes wear out in public because of, being concerned about being judged or stigmatized or discriminated against, for that matter, and to come. We call this like Cheers without the alcohol, it's where everybody knows your name. We're not drinking there, but but it's a place we can all get together and support one another.
And I know your team and probably NAMI as a whole has worked hard to change some of the thinking, change the vocabulary around it. People aren't crazy. They suffer from an illness, just as though they had, emphysema or something that was, they had to work with, something that they had to deal with throughout their life, and that's a reorientation of thinking about it. It's nothing. You wouldn't be ashamed of having. Well, at one time you were ashamed about having cancer, but that has changed as well. So it's not something to be concerned about, other than, look, I have this condition and I work with it, and it's something I live with, like people live with HIV or something else. Is that really what you guys have focused on over the years?
I think that that's a very important way of talking about this issue of mental health and about integration, is this idea that, hey, if someone has diabetes, and which is said to be in some ways an illness of the pancreas, we wouldn't call them crazy.
Right.
We just say, oh, they have diabetes, and
You wouldn't even necessarily think of them as disabled in any way. Just
no, not at
they
all.
have diabetes that they have to contend with, and they work with it, and they go on and lead normal lives.
Exactly. And in all honesty, I mean, I don't know if it's honesty, but just scientific, I think, in fact, the brain is more complex than the pancreas probably. And so it does affect people's, thoughts and feelings and behaviors. And, so it sometimes, if people go untreated, it may be more noticeable than if someone has diabetes. But the basic idea is that, and the mental health movement very much now is about parity, is saying that, like, it's a physical illness, it's a biological brain disorder. And so we're very grateful for things like, the Affordable Care Act that spent, effort to be able to look at these two paths and say it's just a different area of the body, and that, that people just need extra support for.
And there's both medicine or drugs that can help. There's behavioral instruction that can help. And what it sounds like also, there's just community companionship that seems to be very helpful, right?
Absolutely. That's so important, because isolation is one of the things I think that can cook up people's symptoms. Because what happens is that people, initially they may feel ashamed about having a mental illness. So they think, well, I can't really go out past these four walls and and integrate into the community.
That you said that 500-pound door.
That 500-pound door,
really heavy.
exactly. So there can be that stigma, that shame, and so people have resistance, and there is discrimination, and I mean it happens in the workplace, and it happens out in the world, and people get the labels and the terms and things like that. So that just being able to walk out the door to face that fear, and to walk out the door and to then, in a way, link arms with other people who are in recovery and say, not only are we, stronger together, but we also have things to teach the rest of society because of lifting the 500-pound weight and learning to deal with our lives honestly, and to work through denial, and to learn emotional intelligence, and to learn coping skills, and to learn to deal with what at times is a challenge, though actually in lifting that challenge it becomes a strength. And I think that more of that is needed in society right now for us to evolve and to survive as a species, to be perfectly honest.
I'm with you on that. It seems like this is a good time in history to be learning those skills, right?
Yes.
And disseminating those skills as well.
Yes.
So let's segue a bit into the arts. And I know you have been instrumental in bringing about this Recovery Through the Arts program at Metro Suburban NAMI. And it's interesting because we've all had experience with artists, and artists are all a bit off too, right? I was explaining this to a friend of mine some time ago about, well, unless artists were a little off, they wouldn't see things in the artistic way that they do, because art is about bringing new perspective to whatever it is, if it's music, if it's visual art, whatever your art form is. Unless you have a different understanding and really a different vision, different view of what's happening, it's hard to really become truly artistic, because you have to bring this true creativity to it in order to be truly artistic. And so we think about the mad artist or whatever, but there is kind of a spectrum, right? So I think that what I find intriguing about this is that then Recovery Through the Arts would seem to me taps into that differentness, right? That all artists have to possess anyway. And since you're working with people who have this kind of difference, to channel that difference into the arts and to use that as a bridge into something that not only helps them to recover, but as you were talking about, it adds something to society as well, because it's expressing artistic vision. Is that fair to say that?
I think that that's very fair. And again, as we were talking about this idea of that isolation is one of the key factors in people not getting into treatment or not getting integrated into the community. The arts is actually a path for people to connect and to connect in the community with one another, and actually to take the risk, if they're willing to express their stories of their own challenges with mental illness and or their successes of bonding together in fellowship with other people who are in recovery and interested in the creative arts, to then use the arts to craft one's story and to tell one's outsider status and other status and different perspective status. And in doing that, it actually helps a person, and it's helped me to break beyond my own internalized stigma, because to give voice to it is taking it out of the shadows. It's taking it out of that internalized, repressed realm, and which a lot of what I think is art is about, is taking those repressed elements and bringing it out into the light and integrating them. And then to do that and then to share that publicly is actually a radical act. It's a radical act to say, hey, I know that society may look at me in this way. I am willing to face those slings and arrows, and I'm willing to tell my story the way it is, as a lived experience, not as your projection, not as how the news media says it, not as how, the stereotypes about mental illness and that, I'm a shooter or whatnot, and I'm, we're not, but really a true lived experience. And that's, I think, the power of what the arts can bring to the individual who's in recovery, and can bring people to a higher level of recovery for it, and challenge the audience too, to be like, hey, I'm accepting me. If you're not able to, that's not my issue, and I'm going to continue putting my story out there in the hopes that you will be willing to look at it from a different perspective. And that ultimately, I believe, is what changes public policy too.
So it's not just the individual that's helped here. Once again, coming back to what we've been talking about earlier, this is a way to change public perceptions, ultimately public policy, and it reminds me some of the movement in the 70s, the gay community, which in fact was considered a mental illness.
That's right.
At that time, to come out and say, no, we're your neighbors. We live next door. We work in the cubicle down the hall. We're just like you, just with this one difference. And so ultimately today, it's not completely accepted, much more so than it was 30, 40 years ago. And so I see the parallels here with mental illness, to say, no, we're just like you. We just have this little difference here. And let me explain that to you. Yeah. But if you, as you say, if you keep it in the shadows, then it's weird and it's other, it's unexplored. But if you bring it out, it's not nearly so weird. It's just sort of a difference.
Right. And even in the languaging, Kevin, has changed. It used to be, that crazy person, or that schizophrenic over there, or that depressed person. Even the language, the people first language of that person with a mental illness, or we even say now with a mental health condition, because all of us have mental health. And either we're in a healthy space or unhealthy space or somewhere in between. But actually we have a center in LaGrange. It's a community wellness center, and it's for everybody. And so, we have different workshops there on stress reduction and getting good sleep and good nutrition. There's a yoga instructor who does yoga a couple times a month. So we believe that everybody has mental health, and it's a way of sort of taking it again from this stigmatized other over here and saying, hey, we all have mental health. And honestly, we could probably learn some things from people who have a mental health condition that can help teach us about having good mental health in general.
Let's quickly segue back to the slam that's coming up. Sure. And we're going to have a couple of guests here that you brought in tonight who will be performing at the slam. So give us the little nutshell overview of what we're going to hear from the guests we're bringing in.
We'll have Sonia, to whom we've experienced before. When she performs, she brings an incredibly powerful, really grounded, rooted truth, spoken word about her experience of recovery, and also her experience as a Black woman and her own particular perspectives, again, on her mental health recovery. So Sonia, and who also works for the VA and helps people with jobs.
Okay.
And then we'll have Erica, And we met Erica in a variety of different formats in different mental health circles. She's actually now working with NAMI Metro Suburban. She performed at our Recover the 19 event. And so we're just, she's, as she says, a pastor's wife. She's a teacher in her own right. She's a public speaker. She's a writer and a performer and a singer, right? And she will be singing The Rose at our event on April 5th.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
So we're here with Erica Bailey. Erica, welcome to the show.
Hi.
And you're going to perform at the upcoming NAMI Recovery Slam, right? So tell us a little bit about what you're going to do at the Slam.
At the Slam, I will be singing.
Expertly, I'm sure.
It remains to be seen.
What do you think you'll be performing?
On that night, I will be performing The Rose, a song by Bette Midler. And the reason why I choose that song is because, number one, I've been singing that song since my youth. That song means so much to me. And the reason why I love that song is because, in particularly, the last line in that song where it says, "Just remember, in the winter, far beneath the bitter snows, lies the seed that with the sun's love in the spring becomes the rose." And I think that's so meaningful because we all go through things in life that are very difficult, but we have to remember, if we just hold on, with the sun's love in time, that rose will come forth. And I think it's really important for that message to be portrayed. And so that's the song I'll be singing that evening. Music means a lot to me. It's always been a way for me to express myself, express my deepest emotions. I'm sure it will be a way for me to connect with my audience and a way to say thank you. I grew up one of 4 children. I was the youngest of four girls, and even though I was surrounded by a lot of people, it was somewhat of a traumatic time for us in our childhood. And I grew up isolated and lonely, and so music was a solace for me. And so I have always turned to music to find safety and to find security. And during a time where I really couldn't express myself, I didn't feel free to express myself, music was a way for me to
do that.
Right?
To let people know what you were feeling.
Yeah. So I didn't feel free to just say what I was feeling, but when I would turn to music and be able to sing, it was a way for me to say what I was feeling without them actually knowing that those were my true thoughts and emotions.
Well, it's interesting to hear. As you know, I also play music, and I found myself as well sometimes, although people around me would say I have no trouble talking about what's going on. But I have found the same with music, that it is a way to express something without having to worry about putting it into words. It comes out just very naturally. It comes out as free-flowing. So you got into music as a youngster, right? And you've been singing ever since?
Singing ever since, yes.
And do you sing in your church, or do you sing in other venues?
Well, while growing up, I sang in grammar school, I sang in high school, I sang all the way through college. I've also sang in church. So I've been singing all of my life, but probably the most meaningful singing experiences have been singing by myself. And so I'm grateful for the gift of music because, again, it's a way for me to soothe myself, I can remember distinctly songs like The Tracks of My Tears by Smokey Robinson.
I grew up with that tune.
Yeah. And the lyrics of those songs are so powerful. Take a good look at my face. You see my smile looks out of place. But if you look closer, it's easy to trace the tracks of my tears. During my childhood, there were some really tough moments, and I smiled and I laughed my way through a lot of it. But if you looked a little bit deeper, you would have seen a child who was very broken, who was very isolated, who was dealing with a lot of anxiety and depression. And again, music for me was a way to really connect. The artist gave me a voice. People like Karen Carpenter, Rainy Days and Mondays always get me down. And I would sing my heart out, and nobody really knew that it
was
really got
you-
me
you were
down.
speaking the truth,
I was
right?
speaking my truth, but then I was still able to laugh and smile and be my expected self. And so music was really a way for me to deal with those emotions that I wasn't, I didn't really know what they were. I didn't know what to do with them. And so music was an avenue for me to express myself.
So at the upcoming Slam,
Mm-hmm.
what message will you want to get to your audience when you're singing at the Slam?
When I sing at the Slam, it will be a song of gratitude. It will be a song of thanksgiving. It will be a song of victory, because I do live with a mental health condition, but through
And by the way, no one, I think, would guess that just meeting you.
Oh, I hear that a lot.
Now, I have
I'm
a
glad
que-
you mentioned
I have
that.
a question for you, Charles. So at one point, when Erica said, she has a mental health condition, and I said, well, I would never have guessed that. Is that okay to say, or is that in its own way, kind of a slam?
First of all, thank you for asking that question. Erica, what was your experience of that? I think that...
It's hard. I hear it a lot.
I didn't expect that.
It's hard.
Yeah,
It's hard
okay.
because,
Okay.
and the reason why you don't is because I'm an actress. I'm an actress, and I've hid it since, but remember I talked about since I was a kid.
Right.
I've hid it for so long. And so a lot of people don't suspect that I have a mental health condition. And it's only when I come around my peers that I can
Acknowledge it
I
and
can
live with
say,
it. Right.
this is who I really am. But for many years, I've had to put the makeup on, get myself together. But when I come around other people who live with a mental health condition, I can breathe. I can be my true self. So I get it a lot. I get it a whole lot.
And I would think that because you hear a lot from people that say they don't notice it, that may be a message of strength to your peers as well, that, look, you can be a regular person. Yes, you have a condition like this, but that doesn't prevent you from interacting just like anyone else would in the society and becoming just a regular part of society. That this shouldn't hold you back, and obviously has not held you back, or it doesn't appear that it has held you back.
I fight like the Dickens. I really do.
But you succeed, and I think
I
that's
do.
the,
I
that's the
succeed,
key
but
here.
I fight like the Dickens. It's a recovery path. It's a recovery journey every single day. Every single day. It's a what worked yesterday, okay, and then what needs to be tweaked. Every single day, I have to fight my recovery journey in order to be my best self, in order to be my productive self every day. If I don't practice my recovery tools, this is not the person that you would see. I would not be able to get out of bed.
Interesting, but you've been able to develop the discipline of this practice, right? To be able to go through the steps every day.
With the help of so many other people, with the help of my therapist, with the help of support groups, with the help of NAMI. So it's taken a team approach. And so I guess what I'm saying is I never want people to think, boy, she's got this thing licked. If I didn't have people around me, if I didn't have people genuine like Charles, like who say I hurt too, man, I tell you, I don't know where I'd be.
Well, and that's part of the point of NAMI, right?
If
Is
I
to
didn't
create
have
that
NAMI.
community.
Yeah.
To say you're not in this alone.
I really don't know where I would be. I need people who are genuine enough to say, you know what, I hurt too. Hey, I know what that feels like. Anxiety, I've got that too. I need real people around me, because then that gives me the motivation to get up and fight. It really does. If I've got everybody around me and says, hey, my life is perfect, that makes me feel like such a...
Well, if they tell you that, they're lying.
Yeah,
I
I
don't care who they
need
are.
real people. I need real, because they feed me.
Yeah.
They feed me, and you all make people. They make me want to fight. So I don't know.
Great.
So, but with organizations like NAMI, NAMI really helped me to come to terms with the fact that I'm living with a mental health condition, number one, and also to recognize that I'm not alone, and to also give me the skills to say, yes, I'm living with a mental health condition, but I can fight. And I can win. And so when at the Slam, it will be a song that brings us all together, all my peers, and say, we're not alone. We can fight and we can win. And so it will be a way to say thank you, and we're all in this together, and I love you. So that will be my message.
Well, Erica, I can't think of a better way to sum up our brief interview here. And I wish we had more time to talk. You're a fascinating person.
Oh, thank you.
So I want to wish you the best of luck at
Thank you.
the slam.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for being here.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. So our next guest tonight is Sonia Elbow-Timmon, who will also be performing at the upcoming Recovery Slam. Sonia, welcome to the show. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about what got you involved in NAMI. Well, actually, before I even do that, what are you going to be performing when you get to the slam?
When I get to the slam, I am going to be performing a piece of poetry that I wrote as I was transitioning from trauma therapy. And this
speaks about that transition?
It actually speaks about the recovery process and the re-education of myself that I got from the benefits of having therapy, and the actual title of the poem is The Re-Education of Me. So
I love that. And it's such an interesting concept, too, that in working through these kinds of transitions, it is a matter of changing the way you think about yourself, right? Is that really what happens here?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, the poem ends with, I finally love me. So.
Well, and I would say probably also you finally understand you.
I understand, figure out what makes me tick, why I do the things I do, and why my thought processes are the way they are. And so this piece just brings it all together. And for me, it's given a sense of hope and the motto that, never quit, keep fighting. And as long as you keep going, you'll find your sweet spot. So
that's a theme that we've with other guests, we've talked about that, about the ability to keep going. And even in all endeavors, on this show I've had people who are, artists or even politicians or whomever, but there is a common theme of the struggle never ends. You have to keep working it every day, right?
You have to. So for me, I'm also a Marine Corps veteran, so a lot of times I use the values and the disciplines, a lot of the camaraderie and the sayings we had in the military are always going in my head. So, it's pick them up and set them down, march from the waist down. As long as I keep marching, I know I'm moving forward. And so those are things that I try to distill in this piece of poetry and my everyday life and my family. I teach it to my kids, that my children know cadence like the back of their hands.
So they can do it as well.
They can do it as well.
On the rhythm. And, so tell me about how you came to become associated with NAMI and how you got drawn in there.
Well, I started out with NAMI. I was actually one of their speakers for their Be Vocal series. And I would go around and tell my story, just a way to, for me, helping me, and then to give hope to other people and actually bring awareness to mental health. And I did a lot of that in the classrooms. I also went to a bunch of the different police stations when they did their trainings and gave my stories there too. So
interesting, because the police have to understand it better than they do now as well, so that mistakes aren't made.
Absolutely. I was so enamored by the fact that, the police will be there and asking questions.
And willing to learn.
And willing to learn how to go about it. So I think it's really great that mental health awareness is out in the community, and everybody needs to play a part, because it happens to all of us.
And everyone benefits. And that's
everyone benefits.
Another one of the common themes I hear about. This is not just a program for the people who are working through mental health issues. It's for everyone involved. It's for all of the community, because we're all, we're all in this together.
We're all in this together. Mental health is a nationwide concept. Whether it's you may have a mental health condition, or someone you know, or someone you know who knows someone you know. So I think the better we're able to have a conversation about it and not keep it hidden under the rug, the easier and the less stigma will be attached to it. To me, even though I have a mental health diagnosis, I am not my diagnoses. I'm so much more than that. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, and I think that's really important too, that your identity of you as a person is not defined by this condition.
absolutely not.
Anything more than, we use the example of, say, diabetes. Yes, a person can be referred to as a diabetic, but if you accept that role, then you're an invalid. But
Right.
if you just say, no, I'm a person and I have diabetes, and so I deal with it. And there's really no difference here, right?
There's no difference. As a matter of fact, I actually, in my job, I work as a peer specialist. So in my job, I actually make sure I make that point that having a diagnosis or any other disability doesn't define you. It just means that you have to find your own special way to get things done. But you're still able to do whatever it is that you've always wanted to do. And so I expect my recovery to happen simply because I know that's who I am and that having a diagnosis does not define me. Instead, it just gives me another option. When I think of hope, I actually, HOPE for me is having options for my own personal events. So I have many different pathways that I can still obtain whatever my dreams, whatever my goals are. And so I just keep pushing forward.
I'm inspired. No, really, just sitting here and hearing how you've approached this and the way you've integrated it into your life is just a regular part of being a regular person, right?
Right. We all go through things. We all have problems, and
Tell me. Right.
it's all for me. It's a matter of how you look at it. You heard the concept is the glass half full.
Yeah, it seems like a simple
Am I
cliche.
disabled or
Or
am I special or strong enough to go through life with a diagnosis?
yes,
Right.
does that make you even stronger than
Right.
the average person because you have this condition and you've learned
And
to
I
integrate it? Right.
Still go through life, and I'm still taking names. I'm still
Holding people accountable. Right. Right.
yeah.
Well, Sonia, I want to thank you so much for being here. It's really been a pleasure speaking with you, and I want to
Thank
wish you the
you.
best of luck at the upcoming slam.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. So, Charles, I want to thank you for being here tonight. It's been, as always, an enlightening conversation. So tell us just in a couple of sentences, or a few minutes, what should we take away from this whole, both from the slam that's coming up and just from tonight's show? People will come away and we want them to think a certain thing about mental illness and people who are dealing with it. So, in a nutshell, what do we want people to take away from tonight?
Kevin, 1 out of every 4 or 5 people will experience a mental illness in their lifetime. So it is your family members, it's your friends, it's your colleagues, it's your coworkers. And so I think that this whole movement of community mental health and also of recovery through the arts is a way to say, hey, this is all part of the human fabric. And so it's an opportunity for us just to deal with something in an open and honest way, in a way in which we can understand one another more and support each other more, and to be part of more of a compassionate society and a compassionate community that cares, that doesn't discriminate, that can respect differences and express those differences then, through the arts and in the myriad of ways that that the human soul can express itself, and we can celebrate that in one another.
Well, I can't think of a better way to sum it up than what you just did. So, Charles, thank you so much for joining us once again here on Public Perspective. So I want to also thank our audience for seeing us once again. Check us out on publicperspective.tv and come back and see us again. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott. So till next time, thank you and good night.
For each other, must be for each other. Everyone's my brother, my father's sister, mother, and I'm my brother's keeper, and my sister's keeper. The stronger they become, the better I am.
think we just got our national anthem for the Purpose of the Arts. That was beautiful.